Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers, and welcome to another episode of Her Thoughts, a brand new show on Imam Hussein TV, where we discuss a range of topics and take and delve in and implement these lessons into our own life. Now, today we are discussing the role models of the daughters of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You see, consciously or subconsciously, we all look up to, admire role models to a certain extent. We model our lives on the people that we admire. But the question is, are they the correct role models? Who are we looking up to? Is there a correct role model? Inshallah, we'll be discussing that in today's episode, as well as looking at the daughters of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the question is, what is the importance of having role models? What is the importance of having good role models? And do people in our society look up to and admire the daughters of the Holy Prophet Muhammad and actually model our life after them? All that, inshallah, in today's episode. Once again, I'm joined with my co-host. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
So let's get into this episode. So first of all, let's try to establish what is a good role model. What would you consider or describe as a good role model?
I think, in today's society, in today's generation, you find that your youth are tending to look at alternative role models. Social media is so rife right now that there is so much out there, and you find that your children are looking up to these people. We have our perfect role models in Islam, say the Fatima, say the Zainab, say the Bibi Kulthum, Bibi Rubab. We all have these perfect examples of how they led their lives. Say the Zainab was not infallible. Yet we have her lessons, we have her teachings, we know that her knowledge was great. Even Bibi Kulthum, her knowledge was vast. We have these perfect examples, so we don't even need to look outside of Islam. But we also, we have role models like those personalities, but even role models within our own society, our own culture. We know that there's so many alimas who we can take as role models. Our own mothers should be taken as role models as well.
Yeah, definitely. So what do you think what is the importance of having good role models, and what would you describe as a good role model?
I think as human beings, right from when we're very young, we have a tendency to always imitate what's around us. I'm reading a bunch of parenting books right now, and one of the things that keeps coming up repeatedly is, from a young age, especially up until the age of sort of 3, 4, 5, kids have this person in their lives that is their North Star, and that is the person that they will turn to any situation. Whether they're happy, they want to tell that person. Whether they're sad, they want to share it with that person and get solace from that person. Whether they've accomplished something, they want to boast about it to that person. And so from a very young age, we're always looking for an external source of either guidance or support or someone to share things with. And even in adulthood, when we're going through problems, I don't know if I assume it's both genders, but particularly us women, I think we're more sharers. So whatever we're going through, whether it's happy or sad, we're always looking for someone with a common denominator, someone that's kind of relatable. And so we go through our entire lives almost searching for someone who we can relate to, who we can share things with. And if it's, say they mentioned social media plays such a huge role nowadays, it's so easy to kind of get addicted to the wrong type of role model. We always have tendencies to get addicted to things, whether we realise it or not. And addiction itself is not a bad thing if you're addicted to the right thing. So I say that in the sense that if I am, constantly looking at the right personalities, the women of the Ahlul Bayt, for example, for guidance for every aspect of my life, that's a good kind of addiction, you could say. But conversely, we can very easily fall into the tendency of going on YouTube. Nowadays, there's so much sharing and vlogging, and this is my house, and this is my relationship, and these are my kids, and this is how we dress, and it's so easy to fall into that trap and feel inadequate, or to feel that that's the ideal. And so I think really, really important to pick the right role models.
Definitely, yeah.
is it okay if I sort of go in a different direction? And I'd say that, yes, from a young age, absolutely, I agree with you there, that you will be looking at someone to be emulating, and it's usually, as they say, build that strong relationship with your child so that they're looking at you and you can teach them your values and your standards. But again, we're basing that on the assumption that the parent is a good role model. And again, it could maybe that, you know, when you're as a child, you start looking at your parents and thinking, actually, I wouldn't quite do it that way. So I think that, yes, from a young age, you do look at that, and it's important to make, as good parents, that we give that positive role model. What is a role model? It's someone that you're going to be wanting to be like, and so that you will look at them successful, you will look at what they've achieved, and you'd want to emulate what they have accomplished in their life. In terms of Ahl Bayt alayhi salam, I mean, I, as a female who grew up with, you know, a young girl, grew up with two brothers, they were almost like my role models too. So, you know, if they like fast cars, you know, you see really. So I think it isn't necessary that we need to look at females as our role models and not look at, say, the personalities of Ahl Bayt as well. And I think that we can learn from a vast array of, you know, from those personalities, because they were perfect. And again, but the point is that role models have a relationship with you, and I think that's where we need to build on before we say they are a role model, because like your mother nurtures you, your father, you know, is loving you in both their own capacities. So there's a relationship building, and I think in your children, if you're going to be putting role models into their life, then they need to be real for them, because what is going on with the social media, and I know in my generation it was people like Madonna, you know, she wasn't a social media person, but she was a singer. The media are drumming that into you. She wasn't my role model, to put it out there. But I think I was quite an independent thinker from quite a young age. And I didn't look at those people, but I saw my friends, and you know, even now they'll come and say, oh, you know, the so-and-so family in America, who, you know, the sisters all do plastic surgery. Wow, do you know what they're doing? And I'm clueless, because I prefer to be like that, because I feel like they don't copy my life. I'm not in any way linked to them. There's no relationship there. I don't want my lip fillers or anything like that. So it's really, what are you aspiring to? Know yourself, to know who you want to connect to. And yes, as when we have children, we can help them with sort of subtly bringing in the role models we want them to, but at the end, independent thinking is so important, because we are all answerable for our own deeds, and I think that's so important to know yourself. Where do you want to be? Who do you aspire to? And who are you going to look to for your you know, your levels of standards and, you know, positive
I think
thinking.
You know, when you have children, it's just like, you know, taking back from what you're saying, it's so important to present yourself in a manner that they look at you as role models. So today I can firmly say that I look at my mum in this day and age as my role model. She, you know, when she got married, she lived with her in-laws. The way she looked after her in-laws, the way she cared, to this day where she's got so much respect, because she was a working mother. She worked, she studied, she looked after us, she looked after my grandmother when my grandmother was not well. So, you know, she did so much, and she juggled everything. And I think when we have children, it's also very important to say how we present ourselves to our children, so that they can turn around and not only trust us, but see us as something that they feel proud of. So yes, we have, you know, aspirations where we look at, say, the Fatima as our role model, but the role model in the house essentially is the mother and the father. And so if you don't aspire to be like those personalities, your children, where else are they going to look at? Who else are they going to look at? And that's why social media can be so dangerous as well to children.
Peppa Pig.
Yeah.
To be like Peppa Pig.
But the thing is, now when we talk about social media, I think many of us are grounded in who we are. We're going to come into the daughters of the Prophet and how we kind of portray them as role model, how we can present them, should I say, as role models. But going back to the influence of social media, many of us are very grounded. We've already grown up. We've already, in a certain extent, modeled our life or our thoughts or our beliefs, you know, against a certain group or certain individual. But now with the social media, young minds are being molded, and it seems like you said, when you go back to the fillers, I mean, people that have absolutely nothing wrong with them will begin to see flaws within themselves because of social media or who they want to model themselves after. And I've seen people that look perfectly fine spend so much money getting themselves filled to a certain degree. So, you know, how can we ensure that our daughters, when we talk about daughters of the Prophet, but how can we, in the sense, make sure our daughters are not going down this route and being influenced before the level of maturity where it has a greater influence on who they become as future?
I mean, going like we were saying, the relationship building there. So my relationship with my mother was very strong, and again, I've emulated her upbringing with my own daughter. So we are very close, but in the sense that I don't influence what she thinks. She's now a young adult, but again, she's at that age where she could think, well, I would like the fillers, I'd like this. But when I look at how her journey is as a mother, as how she progressed, she didn't look at these stars, these social media stars, and saying, I want to be like that. It was always looking at the value of what you are as a human being, how Allah has created you, and you're not just a physical being, but you're a soul within that being. And how what we often look at is that we mask our faces with whether they're fillers or whatever they are that you're doing, but what about the soul that's within you? What are you doing to perfect that? And we, in this day and age, we're not focusing on that. And so when people are looking at outer beauty, they're forgetting there's an inner beauty, and that inner beauty needs much more work than the outer. The outer is very simple. So when I look at her as my daughter, and I think, well, she's often thinking about things that are beyond. What Ahl Bayt are teaching us is that this life is transient, and today you have youth, and Allah says, old age is a test for you. So we know that we've got certain periods in our life. Keep it real, and keep it real to yourself. And these people, you can see so many people coming on social media today. There's up, and then tomorrow something will happen. They're down there. And is that how we want to be? It doesn't appeal to me now. Alhamdulillah, it doesn't appeal to my daughter. But again, we do have girls like that in our community who are going through those things. And I always say that if they're struggling, and their mothers may not be the best role models for them. We're, alhamdulillah, you're blessed. You've got a wonderful mother by the sounds of it. But not everybody is blessed. So who are they turning to? And they're turning to these personalities. So should we be doing more because we have been blessed with something that we can share with others?
I think you raise a very, very valid point there. Should we as a community be doing more? Like you said, not every child is blessed with a perfect role model at home. So if you know that particular children are not blessed with, role model like mothers and fathers, do we as a community need to step up and, think these are all our children, this is the future generation.
Absolutely.
And if we're not going to do something, if we're not going to help, if we're not going to intervene at a younger age, what's going to happen to them in their teenage years? Because then they, at that point, to draw and to bring a child back, once they've hit the stage of puberty, then it becomes very difficult.
100%. Yeah.
So
completely agree with what Sayeda said. After a certain point, it does become a little bit more difficult to not convince people, but to kind of unmold the moulding that's already been done, to change a certain mindset. And so it's really important to get in there early. And the ideal would be because we're told in a hadith that the first 7 years, let kids be kids, but it doesn't mean you're not teaching them anything. It just means they're learning through what they're seeing, and what they're seeing most of the time is their parents and their family members and the environment they're in. So the ideal would be for that to be, role model worthy. But if not, then as a community, I suppose we do need to look at other options.
I also think, teaching your child confidence from a very young age.
Definitely.
So they don't have to feel like they have to turn to social media to look, what's now on trend, and what looks good and what's popular and what's not popular. Teach them confidence in their religion, teach them confidence in who they are, teach them confidence in the personalities that we can look up to, so they will never have to turn around and look at somebody else.
Yeah.
I think.
And I completely agree with that. And now going to the daughters of the Holy Prophet, are we presenting them as practical role models for our youth? I mean, many people, I don't hear much where people say, my role model is, I don't know, Sayyidah Zayn people say sometimes, but like Ruqayya, for example, or Sayyidah Ruqayya, or even Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam. I mean, unless it's within religious gatherings, and if it's just a chilled out event, I don't really hear people say that. So are we presenting the daughters of the Holy Prophet in a kind of practical way or practical method, or in a way where people are relating to them and feel like they can model themselves after them?
I think we could definitely be doing more. I mean, we've said this time and time again throughout this series. We kind of only hear about them at the peak of their suffering or the peak of their accomplishments, but they had day-to-day lives. They did things during the day. They didn't kind of come out of a cave for these events and then go back in. And not just the women of the Ahlul Bayt, but just generally when we look at the Ahlul Bayt, there is so much out there about their day-to-day habits, you know, how they used to wake up, how they used to have meals with the family, how they used to have social interactions, and all these intricacies, I feel, could be discussed a lot more, because they're a lot easier to apply than the big feats that potentially they led up to.
I mean, even you know, even if we take small stories from the life of, you know, Bibi Fatima, you know, we know that when she used to wake up for Shab Namaz, she would always pray for others before she prayed for herself. And there's a story where, you know, I think it's Hassanain alayhi salam, it says, you've taken everybody's names, but you haven't taken our names. And we know that, you know, praying for others, Allah accepts your du'as when you pray for others before you pray for yourself. So even those little things, if you teach your children from a small age, or how the story of how the tasbih of Bibi Fatima Zahra, how it was brought to her as a gift, because she was, you know, one day Prophet Muhammad came to her house and he saw that she was, you know, she was cooking and she was cleaning and she was also looking after the children in the home. And if we teach our child that, look, yes, she was a daughter of the Holy Prophet, yes, she was a lady of light, but she was also a mother, and she was also striving to do the best that she could for her children as well. And look how the tasbih of Bibi Fatima Zahra was given to her to help her in her daily life, and how that helps us in our daily life every single day.
Prior to going to that stage, I do believe that you have to be living that life, because
Yeah.
children, as we've said in other programs, that they are like sponges, and if they see that you are dictating to them something that you're not doing yourself, they'll be the first ones to point it out to you.
No,
so you
100%.
cannot claim to have a role model that is, so you're saying if they're real, they won't be real if you're not applying their teachings in your life, because that will be, as a child, you can always, you know, we should always mention the holy personalities, but when they start to see, wow, I'm really, you know, that this is how my parent is, my father is like this, my mother is like this, then that puts the child in awe. And when you say, well, yes, because this is how our Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, lived his life,
Yes.
then they're going to be like, wow, what was he like? And often the beauty of our Holy Prophet is that, you know, there's so much love for him that he, you know, beyond ourselves, our parents, anything. So that connection can go into your children, but live your life yourself to be before you're preaching to
100%.
children. And I think that when I see it, and where I'm coming from when I'm saying that, is when you see children, you know, who have gone away not to you know, be close to their parents, not to follow Islam, to go to these other personalities, is because there's something that we've lacked in ourselves, that, you know, that we haven't been able to pass on to our children. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that when you look at, you know, the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, when I'm saying apply it to our lives, you know, when he used to pray, and, you know, Imam Hussein used to jump on his back, and, you know, he showed the kindness and the mercy that he had towards the children, and children learn through, you know, love, discipline, all of that. But if they showed it, Ahlul Bayt did, then that's how we should be, and that's how we should be showing our children as well.
Definitely, yeah. When it comes to the daughters of the Holy Prophet, I feel like a popular opinion that has been presented is that they are people that are not attainable. For example, when we say that Sayyid Zayd alayhi salam, her shadow was never seen, and people say we live in a different climate, we live in a different age, we live in a different time than the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, so they would rather kind of imitate or take as a role model someone that is living in the same society and in the same time. In a sense, I want to really tackle and break down how we can actually present them as role models that people can actually connect with, because at the current time, people do feel like there is a huge disconnect between the two.
But I don't think there is, personally, because I think when I look at certain things that happen in my life, I will, you know, look to say the Zainab alayhi salam, look to the women of Ahlul Bayt and think, okay, well, how did they go through their trials? And that will affect me.
What about the youngsters? Do you think
But even Lady Khadija, when you say, okay, you know, when the youngsters want to have, you know, they're empowered, and, you know, the West will empower them, or, you know, certain role models will empower them. Well, we don't need to go and get empowered for today. And, you know, like I said, there's no perfect society today. But Lady Khadija has so many beautiful lessons. I feel that the service she gave as a wife, the woman she was as a businesswoman, the way she dealt with a society full of men. You know, there's some careers at the moment that, you know, is more male dominated. There's so much we can learn from her. And as for the daughters of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, when we look at Lady Fatima alayhi salam, who's obviously the most one that we look up to, every aspect of her life, the daughter she was, the you know, that young child she was. That, you know, if you go through her life, these are not stories. They are of a personality that. Sorry.
No, just carrying on from what you're saying. Every aspect of her life is a teaching for us. So even when Hussein alayhi salam, when they were not well, and we know that Imam Ali and Bibi Fatima fasted for 3 days after they after the temperature, I think they had a high temperature, and after they were feeling better, they fasted for 3 days. And then we have the stories about the knock on the door and how they gave away the iftar. But these are all little lessons for us to learn from. So yes, we have, you know, they are infallible, and to reach that stage is, we're not going to reach their stage. And yes, they lived many years ago, but their teachings are so, we can use them in our current lives today.
I think they're immortal lessons.
Yes,
they're not,
exactly.
They're not limited
and you know, going back to what you said, if we change ourselves as mothers, as fathers, as even as older siblings, you know, if you have older siblings in your house, and the younger sibling will tend to look up to the older siblings as a role model. If you tend to change yourself in the house, they don't have to go elsewhere. And you know, even if you take one lesson from the lives of Imam Hussein or Hazrat Abbas, you know, just from their lives, and try and implement it into your daily life every single day, whether it's, you know, praying namaz on time, or waking up for shab namaz, or even the little things I tell my son, okay, you don't have to pray namaz, sit down and do a tasbih next to me. You know, those little things will then make them think later on in their life.
But when you look at, I mean, I'm wondering with your question, in terms of like looking at fashionistas online, and, you know, seeing that your young girl is growing up and she wants to, you know, have that latest lip colour, and, you know, and all these bloggers out there and all of this and all of that. And, you know, no doubt it's a difficult task, you know. And you're going to be seen as an evil parent that's, you know, stopping them from, you know, I'm saying that that's probably those kind of lifestyle those people have, that those children want to do all of that, what society is gearing them towards. And then there's you telling them, oh, well, you need to be good for, you know, Allah, and they're sort of going through this teenage period.
It's difficult.
It is difficult,
you know,
undoubtedly. Let's not
it's a
pretend
difficult test, and it's a difficult battle, not just for the child, but for you as a parent. How you bring up the child in today's society, where we have, you know, where you go out and people are, you know, half dressed, and then you have this constant battle of how you want to raise your child, how you want your child to be dressed, especially in the summer months. And for girls that do hijab, you know, they're young, and they want to wear what their friends are wearing, but they can't wear it. So yes, it's a constant test, and it's a constant struggle, but it then makes them who they are as well. And if they...
But not everyone will see it like that. A child will say, well, you're making everything so difficult for me.
Yeah, and there will be times where they do question, but I think it also comes back to the level of teaching and the level of kind of understanding that you give them from that young age, because those tender years are so important. And if they see that you're covered up and you're doing this and you're practicing what you preach, then they will automatically, I think, there will be times where they rebel, and that's with all children. But I think if the foundation is strong, hopefully they'll come back to that.
I think more than, sorry, did you want to say anything?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that, you know, while we're jumping ahead and saying, okay, that's the later life, but I think children really look at, and I often think, as a parent, what you can do the best for your child. Yes, we can teach them about covering and, you know, the fiqh side of things, but it's their heart, because if you don't teach them to be kind human beings, to be polite, to care about other human beings, they will become this hard-hearted version. And when they're young teenagers, you know, they're going, oh, I don't care, nothing to do with me. Why should I care there's someone suffering in Iraq? Well, it's nothing to do with me. I want my iPad, you know, I want the latest thing, I want this and that. And if you're leading them down a materialistic path, you're leading them down a very dangerous path. And those role models will come with those devices, and they will be on those gadgets, and everyone's got that. And if you don't start putting the stops on a very young age, say, well, why are you getting something? What, you know, I remember I was the evil parent for my youngest, because he wanted a phone at 8, and his friend Jacob had the latest gadget, and you know, that's it. That's the standard I had. And I said, you're not having a phone, you don't need it. But and now he laughs. He says, you know, Mum, you raised us so well that these values that they have, they look at people that, you know, perhaps weren't raised like that, and they think, alhamdulillah, that we had a mother like you. So to hear that when they're adults is amazing, and I just pray that they continue that, because if I had a child that was going to pray namaz al-shab, like Imam Ali says, you know, those people that are in the mosques and praying day in, day out, but they're the most vile people, I wouldn't want a child like that. I would want a child that is a human being, that is practicing their faith and has a beautiful heart. And I would know that I'd done my job. And hopefully they're not looking at role models that are going to teach them anything other than being good human beings.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everyone's got their own way to raise children, and what we want for our kids. I mean, and these role models, when they look at, they read stories and they share it, it's a family, they share it. And I think, and they're like, oh wow, Mom Jawad did this and this, and then I think, subhanAllah, because you just need to plant the seeds. Imam Ali says they're fertile ground. Plant the beautiful seed and let it sprout.
Which is why I think it's so important to teach them essence and the beauty and the importance of sadaqah and charity from such a young age, because that then they learn that, look, there are people around the world who are less fortunate than they are, and if you and talk to your children, this is what's happening to our Muslim brothers and sisters around the world. And it's our duty, it's all our responsibility to help them.
And would they really care then what somebody in America is doing with, party lips?
Well,
they'd be like, there's more important things, perspective, and I think,
exactly.
I don't know.
Final words before we end off? Anyone's got any final words?
Just completely echo what Zahra said about, yes, there are certain things that have to be done because of the Sharia and things like that, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the soul. And kids mostly, they only learn by seeing that and experiencing that and, feeling the kindness of the people around them as well. So 100% definitely focusing on the heart, and just, if you have someone with a good heart, they're more likely to do those things anyway. But if you try and impose those things from a superficial level, it's almost impossible to get any further than that point.
Yeah, I truly believe, I feel that we are not mentioning the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam on a daily basis to our kids, and I think that sometimes there is a void that kids feel like they need to fill. So because I truly believe this, because I see this myself, that we're not talking about them, and we're not talking about their daily life and how they behaved, and like Zahira said, sometimes we only talk about them in the peak of their struggle, how they were killed, how or when they were born, and that seems like the only discussions that we have throughout the year, when it's in their mawlud or their shahada. And I feel like we need to begin to implement them and talk about them as if they were individuals that, to make them a reality. And the examples in the Quran is that we read the Quran all the time, and Allah always says that we bring, even Asiya, he says we bring her as an example and a lesson to humanity. And we read the Quran all the time, so we constantly get reminded of Asiya and her role, and how she kind of, although she had everything in her fingertip, she would rather have had a house close to Allah and in the hereafter. So I feel like the same needs to be applied with the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. We need to begin to talk about them on a daily basis and talk about them in a practical way, rather than just their shahada and their mawlud.
I think one story that comes to my mind, especially when we're talking about children with manners and akhlaq, is the story of when Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein saw the elderly man doing wudu, and the man wasn't doing wudu correctly. So instead of hurting his feelings and saying, you're not doing wudu properly, they demonstrated on themselves. So they didn't even need to tell him, he automatically saw how to do the wudu properly. So they taught him, but they respected him as well, and they had manners because he was older.
So obviously, and your kids will see you, and if you're sort of saying and they will see the difference. And if you're saying, this is how Imam Hassan and Hussein said it, and I think children, if you, we have little stories at bedtime with them every night without fail, because bedtime is when they're really absorbed there, what they're going through, and children are innocent, they're born pure, and obviously through sins we get corrupted as adults. But to really tap into that essence of beauty, children love beauty, they love Allah has put that His fitrah in us, so they will warm to the stories of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And the Quran is such a beautiful book. I mean, every life story you want, every example, it's in there. And it's our manual for life. So, like you said, 100% Zahra, that, use that as an everyday example. Definitely, to God, to the children, sorry.
Thank you all so much for today's episode, and thank you for the viewers that have tuned in. I hope, inshallah, we've left you some thought-provoking points that, inshallah, we can take with us. And the question that I want everyone to ask is that, are we presenting the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, the daughters of the Holy Prophet, as practical role models for our youth and even ourselves to imitate and take as role models? And if we haven't, what can we do to kind of make that a reality? So inshallah, join us in the next episode, and thank you all for tuning in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.